In a world populated by monsters, numerous guilds attempt to execute each and every one of them in a tower to determine who is the strongest of all. Hunter Yunsuha, also called Flame Emperor, walks out of the tower with reporters flocking and cameras flashing just to see him. However, one man named Kim Gongja, who is also a hunter, seemed to always desire he could be like the Emperor. For him, if the universe were a novel, the Emperor would be the main character, and he would just be an extra. Since the Flame Emperor serves as an inspiration to many aspiring hunters, when asked what his advice is, he simply said that if someone succeeds, they will succeed. But he also threatened those watching that when they succeed, they must make sure not to surpass him, or else he will kill them. Ooh, that's too villainy for a hero. After saying those remarks, he just walks away with cameras still flashing over his face. People went crazy over what he said. Even the guy who wishes to be Flame Emperor starts questioning the screen what Flame Emperor really means. Getting no answer, he drops the tablet out of frustration. Being an F-rank hunter must be really tough, huh? He starts removing all the posters he put up on his wall of the Flame Emperor while tears come flowing out of his eyes. Then a ball of light appears above his head and a golden card is shown, which is known to give hunters skills. In short, it's a skill card. He taps the card hoping for the best because gold signifies it is an S-rank skill, but he ends up getting a really disappointing one, a skill that will only be useful if he is killed. That's really sad. However, the skill itself is extremely unique in a way that he will be able to acquire the skills of the person who kills him. But it is still depressing to think that he must first die. Like honestly, what kind of skill is that? It is told that once upon a time in the world, a tower emerged with monsters from other realms on each floor, and those who didn't have anything to lose ascended the tower and were given skill cards. As a result, monster hunters were born, and needless to say, Flame Emperor is regarded as the finest of them all. Gongja told his boss about his thoughts and feelings at work, as well as the worthless skill he had received. He's too shy and embarrassed to tell anybody about his ability, and I understand why. As Gongja walks home, he hears the announcement of the best performing hunters of the day. And surprise, surprise, the Flame Emperor is still at the top. As he sighs in exasperation in the alley, he hears a quarrel between two people. He's astounded to see the one and only Flame Emperor alongside Miss Saint, a famous and undeniably angelic, gorgeous hunter having an argument. He overhears Flame Emperor claiming that he poisoned Miss Saint's drink since he suspects she is plotting to kill him. Flame Emperor tries to force Miss Saint to reveal the truth that she's indeed working with the Black Dragon Guild to kill him. When he does not obtain the desired response, the Flame Emperor burns the gorgeous Miss Saint in seconds. Of course, Gongja is astounded by what he's witnessed, as anyone would be. Now he begins to wonder whether Flame Emperor is a hero or if he's just a murderous bastard. He quickly wants to get away, but a glass bottle breaks, causing a loud sound that alerts the Flame Emperor of Gongja's presence. Gongja tries his best to convince the said hero to spare him his life. However, he too is able to meet the same fate as Miss Saint. However, Gongja thought everything would end at that moment in time. He's so shocked as he wakes up alive in his dirty apartment once again. It seems like his useless skill card had served its purpose. "What the hell happened?" he said. Gongja realized that he too must have acquired the skills of the Flame Emperor. And to his surprise, the Flame Emperor possesses an ability that may transport him back in time after being killed. That is why Gongja can travel back in time 24 hours before the Emperor executes him. When Gongja saw the Emperor on TV answering the same question about his advice for his aspirants, he felt enraged when he heard the Emperor vow he would murder anyone who surpasses him. Since Gongja already knows what type of person the Emperor really is, he sees him now not as a hero but as a murderous villain. And then, a fire started. As Gongja already knows who started the fire, he now aims to kill the Emperor before he can murder any more people. However, the problem is how. Since the Emperor has the ability to just go back in time when killed, it will be a mission impossible for Gongja. Despite this, he still bet it all since he will be the only one that has the chance to ever kill the Emperor. So, unexpectedly when the huge fire breaks out, he comes diving into the flames to kill himself and go back 24 hours prior. When he got back in time, that's when he realized that killing the Emperor using his own powers seemed to be a not so logical plan. That's why Gongja decided to find other options to be able to do so, and the light bulb in his head lights up as he remembers that there was an interview the Emperor did where he stated when he was able to acquire his skills. And duh, obviously it was when the tower acknowledged his desires and let him awaken his skills. That's why to reach that timeline, Gongja needs to die 4,050 times. I mean, oh damn, that must be a hella painful experience. And without hesitation, he stabs himself to fulfill the mission. He kills himself one after another until he is able to reach his desired date and time, which is June 7th, or precisely 11 years ago. It worked! Gongja is now 11 years in the past. Determined to kill the Flame Emperor who treated him like a bug, he walks out the door with a dagger in his fist that will serve as a tool for his revenge. Now it's his time to find his prey. He pursues the Flame Emperor's past self, who turns out to be a loser in the past for being an F-rank hunter. Gongja and the Flame Emperor appear to have something in common, huh? When the Emperor decides to go to one of the tower's floors to meet his daily quota of slicing slime creatures, Gongja, on the other hand, follows behind him to carry out his plan. When Gongja finds the right moment, he chops some slime himself and uses part of their remnants to spread across his body, making it look like he's bleeding from an attack. He then went ahead to ask for help from the Flame Emperor, or at this time just Yunsu-ha, and asked for a potion. And guess what? Well, some people don't change from the past, and the Flame Emperor is still eccentric and egotistical as he is 11 years in the future. The Flame Emperor is willing to lend Gongja his help in exchange for some money. He pushes Gongja using his spear and asks for gold coins. He then grabs Gongja's clothes while forcefully getting Gongja's wallet. As a result, Gongja falls to the ground while the Flame Emperor is not ashamed of counting Gongja's coins. When things get crazy, the Flame Emperor then aims to stick his spear through Gongja's body. But before any of that happens, Gongja is able to kill him with his green dagger while remembering all the murderous acts the future Flame Emperor did to people and to him. Gongja then lets red vicious wolves eat the Flame Emperor while he turns his back, finally able to accomplish his mission. Then it's pretty much obvious that he'll most likely celebrate his victory. I mean, who wouldn't? And while he is in a pub, a stylish old man enters the establishment with people's eyes glued to him. The man's face seems so familiar to Gongja that after a couple of minutes of thinking, he's then able to remember that the old man is none other than the best of that era, the Sword King. Marcus Callenberry, or much known as the Sword King, is the finest of that era. He's just the first ever #1 before the title is given to the Flame Emperor. While drinking his beer, a light bulb lit up inside Gongja's head. Since he can copy abilities, what if he copies the ability of the first #1? That would really be awesome. However, this simply means he needs to be killed by the Sword King first. And he is lucky since there are rumors spreading around that the Sword King is sorta crazy since he talks all by himself. Other than that, Gongja also remembers that if he wants to be killed by the Sword King, all he needs to do is mention the king's grandchildren, and surely he will instantly slice you into half, like what happened to some hunters he run into a fight with. Knowing this, when the Sword King leaves the pub, Gongja also follows him from behind. In the sea of people, it is super easy for Gongja to find the Sword King due to his yet so vintage clothing style for a modern city like Babylon. Below the bright moon, he shows himself to the king. However, things get out of control when the Sword King reveals he sees how many kills Gongja had. And let's just say that Gongja killing himself over 4,000 times is still counted as murder. As a result, instead of going according to plan, Gongja is so scared by how intimidating the Sword King is. As a result, he rushes off, running for his life with the most frightened look painted on his face. And guess what? Gongja, being the clumsiest person that he is, stumbles upon a rock, causing the Sword King to catch him. At this moment, all the fear inside Gongja is gone, since this time around, he's determined to go according to his plan. That's why he decides to provoke the king to kill him by mentioning his grandchildren. And that one word caused his head to be amputated at the speed of light by the king's sword. And as Gongja's head falls to the ground, instead of feeling pain, he's mesmerized by how the moon looks up in the sky. Then, just like that, he's able to come back to life again now with the Sword King's skills. However, as he clicks the blue screen to see the skills the king has, he's quite shocked when he discovers how simple the Sword King's skills are. Believe it or not, the legend doesn't have any gold cards, which means he doesn't have any really extravagant, powerful super skills. Despite this, Gongja chooses to grab one of the silver cards. However, as he wakes up, he's in disbelief when a red-haired masculine man is lying beside him in bed. Both of them are shocked as their faces meet each other. The red-haired guy then asks Gongja if he can see and hear him. Now, honestly, what kind of question is that? Of course, Gongja answers him sarcastically. It turns out that the red-haired guy is the ghost of the sword saint that the king is using. Gongja further explains to the spirit that he has the ability to copy skills, and that he is able to copy Sword King's skill, hence he also duplicates another copy of the spirit. That said, the spirit is so shocked to hear this, and tears can't stop rushing out of his eyes. Now, Gongja should never show his face to the Sword King, or else things will get complicated. He also did share with the spirit why he decided to go back in time and everything in between. Seems like they're besties already. The spirit then asks him why. Why would he want to copy the old man's skills if he already has the Flame Emperor's talents? Gongja, being the honest person that he is, truthfully said that he wants to have the skills of the number 1 of the era to get even stronger. The spirit then makes an effort to analyze Gongja from head to toe. He truthfully said that Gongja doesn't have the ideal body suitable for a hunter, but it's good that he has ambitions. So to see whether Gongja actually has the ability to become a great hunter, they went outside for Gongja to show the spirit how he kills monsters. He slices them one by one fearlessly and effortlessly, and let's just say Gongja really improved a lot in terms of not fearing death, all thanks to the Flame Emperor's skills. The spirit also commends him for his talent of not fearing being killed, and that's inevitable considering all of the harsh things he has gone through. Gongja is so touched by what the spirit compliments since this is the first time he's ever heard someone commend him for his talent and not see him as a failure. On top of that, the spirit offers to train Gongja if he wants to surpass the Sword King. Aw, the spirit's such a sweetie. The next day, as the spirits don't sleep, Gongja is bombarded with shouts from the red-haired spirit trying to wake him up from his good night's sleep. To make it even worse, it is literally 4 AM in the morning. But eventually, Gongja gave up and just did a morning jog. It has been 4 days since Gongja copied the Sword King's skills, and during that time, he went back in time again to kill the Flame Emperor the second time around, as he also tried his best to avoid making contact with the Sword King. Meanwhile, it has also been 4 days since Gongja and the spirit have been together. Since then, the spirit has been continually coaching Gongja. As we all know, nothing in this world is free, not even for spirits. As a result, the spirit requests payment from Gongja for his training sessions. Let's just say his fee is over the top. He asks to win the lotto, and that's just an easy request for someone like Gongja, who has the ability to travel back in time. And instantly, Gongja did what the spirit requested. People were astonished as the two claimed their jackpot prize of roughly $5 million. And instead of using the jackpot money on useless things, Gongja decides to buy an honorary guild membership to the Give and Take Guild, which will give him protection from the vigilantes. Considering he literally won $5 million, then... oops, sorry. I think that's all we have for today. Let's continue this in the next part of the series. Stay tuned since we might upload it sometime soon. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. See ya! After winning the Babylon lottery, Gongja is practically all set for the rest of his life. However, that is not the goal. His main goal is to make himself the greatest, not one of, but the greatest, even surpassing the Sword King. With all the money he has now, Gongja has no worries about the tuition fees he needs to pay to acquire good education to enhance his copied skills. However, before he can start on the proper physical training, he first needs to learn the basics as per Spirit. And what he means by learning is reading books. Spirit suggested that Gongja needs a textbook, something like an elixir, which will help Gongja increase his physical abilities. Or maybe something like a scroll that contains the principles of martial arts. But in the end, Spirit suggested that Gongja should just get an elixir. On their way to the shops, Gongja is so shocked by how expensive an elixir is. It turns out that with all his prize money, he can only buy around 5 if it is at a discounted price. Like, wow. And to make it worse for Gongja, Sword King also visited the store, making Spirit worried that the old man might have already bought all the elixirs in the store. And since Gongja wouldn't be able to enter the stores anyway since Sword King is in there, he starts typing on his phone, and there, a bright idea is born. Gongja then informs Spirit that he might have a plan where they can save some money from buying expensive elixirs, and still be able to acquire the desired results. Gongja then takes Spirit to a slum where he states that a genius pharmacist lives. As they arrived, commotion welcomed them. A man who seems to be so furious with the green-haired girl keeps on spitting the same words, which state that the said girl needs to pay her debt. And without money, the man brings with him all the belongings the girl owns. As people start to murmur some bad things about the girl, it turns out the girl is the genius pharmacist Gongja is talking about. Spirit is so in disbelief after hearing this. He can't seem to accept that the loser girl, who has now lost all her customers, is going to be one of the most powerful leaders of the future, known as the Alchemy Lord. Knowing this, Gongja took advantage of the moment and offered 20,000 gold for a powerful potion made only by the most powerful pharmacist to ever live. That said, Gongja is now already starting his being the greatest hunter mission. The pharmacist takes them to her mini shelter, or should I say shabby shelter. Shocked by what they witnessed, Gongja still has faith in the future Alchemy Lord. Even though the spirit is still hesitant about Gongja's decision, he still gives him the formula that the pharmacist will follow. As she is writing down each and every ingredient, the pharmacist makes the spirit somehow shocked when she starts blabbering about the positive effects of each ingredient Spirit wants to be incorporated into the elixir. Gongja then asks her when he will be able to get it. According to her, it will take 4 days to finish everything, and considering how in demand she is in the future, that people even eagerly wait for more than a year, 4 days is a deal for Gongja. 4 days later, the pharmacist delivers the 3 boxes of elixir as promised. Being so curious as to why someone like Gongja would trust an untrusted pharmacist like her, she asks the reason why. Gongja then honestly answers that he sees her as a kind hunter, the type that would make the world a better place. The next day, Gongja and Spirit went inside the tower's 3rd floor to finally start the training and check if the elixir the pharmacist made is really effective. On the said floor, large giants reside, which will make the training process a bit challenging for someone like Gongja. There, for the first time, Gongja tries the elixir. Though at first he doesn't feel a thing, after a while the power of the formula started rushing through his veins. Gongja starts to fight the monster. Though he is struggling at first, he is able to push through in the end. However, after he kills one of the giants, Gongja, however, is killed by the other one, as he can't fight back due to exhaustion. When they arrive at what seems to be a reliving waiting area, he and Spirit are overly shocked when a monster skill card pops up. It is quite normal in the tower that humans get a skill card as a gift for their hard work. However, no one has ever imagined that monsters like giants and goblins have one too. So intrigued by what they learned, Gongja now decides to pick one card. At that moment, while flying in the air, Spirit starts to wonder why they wouldn't. Gongja first looks at the card skills before picking them. It turns out that Gongja couldn't see the front while Spirit could. That said, with the help of the Spirit, Gongja is able to know what each card has to offer. One offers the ability to reproduce, while the other one is the ability to communicate with monsters. And since it would be kinda weird if Gongja chose the first one, he decides to choose the latter one. As Gongja wakes up from his death with his newly acquired ability, he now takes Spirit back to the tower to then again start fighting monsters here and there. Gongja drinks 1 bottle of elixir before starting his training. With all energy and eagerness, Gongja walks with pride and confidence to defeat each and every monster coming his way. He immediately aims his sword at the giant with all his might. And since he can basically see every movement of each monster, fighting them would be a piece of cake already. Also, considering how he was able to acquire one useful monster skill, which is able to communicate with them, he has no more worries about being defeated. That said, he instantly slices the monster without thinking twice. However, Spirit on the back is not okay with Gongja using monster powers to kill monsters, since for him, it is cheating. But he can't practically do anything at all. That said, they now start walking to leave level 3 and head their way to level 4. 1 week later, Gongja then starts his journey to the 5th floor, where he fights with the great goblin king Gorok. With the use of all the accumulated abilities he was able to acquire, he is able to kill the goblin king in a snap. Using his sword, he slices the goblin's throat easily. Being so proud after killing one of the most challenging enemies he had for the week, he starts getting emotional, making Sword Spirit irritated. After a while, a shine of aura starts flashing around his body, stating that he has now advanced to a higher rank. As he is feeling the moment, Gongja is smiling as his rank rises exponentially. Showing a tint of red, Spirit starts to wonder what might Gongja's aura be. Is it fire or blood? Since according to him, Hunter's usual aura is based upon their trauma or most sought memories. After a quite brief discussion with one another, Spirit now tells Gongja they should advance to the 5th floor. But that's not what Gongja wants. It seems like he is eyeing to advance to floor 10 instantly. Floor 10 is considered to be one of the toughest floors to clear. Even great hunters aren't able to do so. So hesitant at first, the two decided to place a bet that whoever lost would start calling the other master. That said, the two then make their way to the 10th floor. However, the floor guard is not letting Gongja enter since he knows that Gongja will eventually die in the process. But after a little persuasion, Gongja is able to enter the floor, ready to face every challenge ahead. Hellfire Maiden, 10th floor. This is one of the most difficult floors to clear, as everyone says, and for the first time, Gongja will be able to know the answer to why only Flame Emperor was able to clear it in his previous life. It turns out the floor is covered with flames, hence the name Hellfire, which may be the reason why only the Flame Emperor is able to clear, considering that his aura is fire. However, what makes the floor quite eerie, yet so undeniably unique, is the dolls scattered around the mansion. "Will you play with us?" says the dolls. The main goal is for Gongja to find the boss doll, but it would be a hell of work considering how many there are. As Gongja's time runs out, he's directed back to the place where new skill cards are presented to him. As he chooses the golden card, he's then redirected 24 hours before his death. However, what makes this situation different from the others is that this time, Gongja had a penalty. Gongja is surprisingly taken back to the Hellfire Maiden's trauma. And I would tell you, please buckle up your seatbelts since this chapter is a hell of a roller coaster. Orphans from all over the village start knocking on residents' doors, asking for food to eat. However, instead of helping them, people start talking badly about the poor kids. Then one day, a man who introduced himself as a physician took one of the kids to his mansion, and that said mansion was the Hellfire Maiden. The poor kid thought that the said kind man would help her, provide, and play with her. Little did they know that the man is far more vicious than any animal there is. It turns out that he has been collecting kids from the streets of the town, making them believe he will help them, only to make them sacrifices for their rituals to solve famine. I mean, what adult would blame such a disastrous situation on poor innocent kids? Seeing this made Gongja frustrated, yet so in disbelief that there was a far deeper meaning to the hardest floor to clear. And to make things worse, Gongja is also able to witness the main reason why the floor was named the Hellfire Maiden. It turns out that the mansion caught on fire, and since the owner was inhumane, he just left the poor kids jailed in the basement, all being left to die. And that's when the penalty ends. Remembering all the horrible images in his head, Gongja now has thought of a plan to somehow pay tribute to all the kids that had died, and not do the same actions as what Flame Emperor did. And with that, he's able to clear the 10th floor, making everyone wonder who he is and how he did it. He literally became the main character in a snap. Even the floor guard whom he bribes with money to let him enter comes running, asking for his name. But he opted to keep his identity a secret for a while. That said, since he technically won the bet he had with Spirit, he's now ordered Spirit to call him Master Gongja from now on. And, as expected, the Spirit didn't take it well. Some time has passed by, and Gongja stays at a cafe drinking some good old caramel macchiato, when a group of hunters from different guilds approach him. In the said mini proposal that each guild has, they started offering gold to Gongja. But what really caught his attention is what the cat lady offered, and it's not less than 500,000 golds to be exact. Now that's a proposal. After hearing all the guilds make their offers to him, Gongja can't seem to find the right one to fit for his taste, and it's just a matter of seconds before the other highest rankers hunters come into the scene, with rank 5, Viper, leading the group with a commotion. It is then followed by rank 4, Heretic Interrogator, then rank 8, Crusader, and last but definitely not least, rank 2, Black Witch. Seeing this even made Gongja a bit surprised himself. But before they can even start with the actual meeting, of course, the hunters first need to fight over which coffee to order. And as the commotion started to intensify, they all pretty much gave the floor to Gongja for him to decide. Knowing that the hunters are just testing him to make him lose his composure, Gongja is able to do something that the hunters didn't expect. He stayed calm throughout the situation. Because, after all, the worst that the hunters could do to him is kill him, and as we all know, it always works in Gongja's favor. Knowing that Gongja is able to win the lottery and has guts and skills, it's quite apparent that he's indeed someone who will succeed in the future. As a result, it would be a great asset for the guild that Gongja would join if they had him on the team. But in the case that Gongja does not want to join any guild, the hunters ask him to tell them in advance so they'll know how to handle the media. But if Gongja ever decides to join one, an auction will start. Since the time that Gongja cleared the 10th floor, it gave the hunters a chance to advertise the value of the tower to the outside world. It will give a chance to bring people from the outside and give the hunters from the first floor a sense of adventure. At the end of the day, the clearing of the 10th floor is a great breakthrough for all people, both in the towers and the outside world. That's why Gongja joining a guild is something of a great asset to everyone. But the question is, which guild will Gongja join? To make the decision-making process easier, Gongja decided to let the hunters play a game of cards, and whoever wins will get him as a new member of the guild. But if Gongja ever wins over all of them, the hunters must see him as an equal level, and he will now simultaneously be a member of all the mentioned large guilds. And Gongja, being Gongja, requests assistance from the Sword Emperor. In return, the Sword Emperor will no longer be allowed to refer to him as Lord Gongja, which is a big relief for the poor guy. That said, without dropping a sweat, Gongja is able to win the game effortlessly. One by one, he's able to defeat each and every hunter. Viper, not giving in, keeps on insisting that Gongja is cheating, which is, by the way, really the case. However, Crusader then explains to Viper that from the beginning, Gongja is already apparent to win the game, considering they're all just joining in on his own game. On the other hand, Black Witch also reminded Gongja of the consequences he would be facing once the public knew of his existence. And knowing Gongja, he loves attention, so being the talk of the town wouldn't be an issue for him. That said, Gongja wins the game. Before preparing to enter the 11th floor, he also gave the other hunters a hint on what to anticipate from now on. It seems like the 11th to 20th floor would all be a roleplay. Now it's just a matter of time before they all enter a whole new journey. Now as the countdown for the 11th floor opening is almost over, everyone now is ready to welcome a whole new adventure, especially those eager hunters. As the time finally comes, what seems to be a hologram then appears to the public. Amazed by her beauty, everyone can't seem to get their eyes off her. Knowing that it's just an NPC, Gongja didn't really give much attention as everyone else did. As the entrance to the 11th floor starts, different hunters of whatever rank start entering the floor one by one. It is then revealed that the 11th floor till the 20th will be met with a test of faith, and through the hunter's journey in the said floor, they'll be able to reveal who they really are. Before he can even enter the 11th floor, Crusader, who seems to look so suspicious in the eyes of the sword spirit, turns out to have told the media about Gongja's identity. Now surrounded by reporters, Gongja doesn't have the time to entertain them now. As a result, he immediately rushes off to the 11th floor while leaving a statement that he will clear the 20th floor too. As they now enter the 11th floor, the first thing that welcomes them is the battle between the people of the Agim Empire and the Demon King's army. Since Gongja is able to clear the 10th floor, the tower has given him a reward, and it's the privilege of having access to all of the NPC's abilities. And there's more. The tower has also given him a chance to choose any items that exist on the 11th to 20th floor, which is definitely a great asset in conquering all the challenges at each level. Now that's what you call lucky. It is said that the first 10 floors of the tower are called the tutorial floors. It's a city for beginners to adjust to the tower. And the floors from the 11th to the 20th are called the Demon King's Quest, and this is where the real adventure starts. There are two ways to defeat the Demon King. One is on your own, as long as you are strong enough, or you can also lead an army yourself. And we all know Gongja doesn't have a talent for bringing people together. As a result, the only way he can do so is by acquiring the skill of one good leader. That's why with the use of his newly acquired abilities, he starts to look for NPCs with good leadership skills. After finding the right one, he bluntly asks the NPC to kill him, since accordingly, he has the secret ability that once he's killed, the entire battlefield receives a blessing from God. The sword spirit just can't believe that the NPC falls for Gongja's schemes. As a result, Gongja has now acquired the NPC skills and is now leading a whole army of them, making other hunters wonder who he is. By acting as a military strategist using his navigation skills, Gongja is able to gain the trust of the general, and now he is leading an army of NPCs to the demon army's commander. Meanwhile, the NPC sees Gongja as the warrior of the goddess due to the item, which is, by the way, a useless sword that Gongja chose earlier. It is said that whoever possesses the sword will be the Agim Empire's savior. On the other hand, the other hunters have now grown quite bitter about Gongja, and let's just say their envy is what Gongja always wanted. Now that Gongja has finally completed defeating the demon army at the left wing, he will not stop until all are beaten down. But he is not the only one eager to defeat these monsters. Other high-ranking hunters are also doing their best to defeat the enemies. Now that the Goblin King is within parameters, with just one swing of his sword, Gongja is able to kill it. This made everyone delighted with the results. Now that the 11th floor is cleared, it is time to see who is the best of the best. As the screen flashes the top 10 subjugators, everyone is shocked that Gongja is able to surpass the ever-mighty Sword Saint. The NPC general has now given his sincere gratitude to Gongja for everything that he has done for the Empire, and as they shake their hands, calculated rewards start flashing on the screen. The said rewards will be distributed to all the top subjugators, and just like that, it's time to conquer another quest. As they are now transported to the royal palace of the Agim Empire, just as expected, the Sword Saint comes attacking Gongja after seeing how many kills he has done, thinking that Gongja is an assassin. However, before anything goes out of control, the heroic questioner is able to block Sword Saint's attack. He also lets Crusader and Viper do their thing and protect Gongja at any cost. If you still remember, Gongja has formed an agreement with the said high-rank guilds. That means once the Sword Saint draws his sword at Gongja, it also means he is declaring a fight with the other high-rank hunters as well. This being said, this makes the Sword Saint really frustrated. This just shows that sometimes you need support more than you can do something on your own. The Sword Saint then comes to state that the world outside in Babylon isn't much different. And the time he entered the tower, different guilds also pressured him to join theirs. However, instead of having a strong, firm connection with people that will surely be an asset to him as well, Sword Saint decided to do all the hard work by himself to show people that one could stand alone on top even with just one's hard work. But the other hunters just see the Sword Saint as an arrogant old man who always thinks about himself. They also shared their frustrations as the Sword Saint could have helped lower down the number of casualties during raids, but instead, he only thinks of himself. putting the lives of others at risk. And as the arguments have heated up, the hunters and the Sword Saint are now ready to fight. However, before anything goes out of control, Gongja comes rushing in, trying to slap the senses out of the hunters and the Sword Saint. He reminds them that what matters right now is that they can clear the 12th floor rather than pointing fingers at each other. But before they can start doing so, Crusader will now use their lie detection skill to see who's not telling the truth between Sword Saint and Gongja. Putting all their trust, the interrogation now starts. However, Sword Saint seems not to believe all of the Crusader's verdicts, as it states that Gongja has always been telling the truth. Now cornered, Gongja asks the Sword Saint for an apology. Pressured by the other hunters, the Sword Saint now has no other option but to apologize to Gongja for the misunderstanding that he caused. Also feeling guilty about his actions, Gongja is quite shocked as the Sword Saint bows his head and says his sincere apology. Sword Saint then states that he has killed people according to his beliefs. However, from now, it shall never happen again. And instead of degrading the Sword Saint, Gongja asks him to teach him how to use the sword and be his duel mate. Feeling a bit shy, Gongja asks the Sword Saint to be his teacher and teach him all the sword techniques out there. And all of this being the truth makes the whole situation a bit heartfelt for everybody. Witnessing all this makes the hunters believe that there is such a miracle in the world. But Gongja is taken back as Sword Saint transitioned from being the grumpy grandpa to a more energetic one. It seems like the Sword Saint is quite delighted that someone has asked him to be a duel partner. He even tells Gongja to call him Grandpa Marcus. They literally become besties in an instant. He even tries to set his granddaughter on a date with Gongja. Then, Gongja's reward for ranking number 1 while clearing the 11th floor flashes in. There are 2 choices to choose from. First is the Goddess of Protection, and the other is the Demon King's reward. And between the two, the Demon King's reward is more promising. Since if Gongja kills all the other top 10 hunters, he will immediately advance to level 99. And it's just a matter of time before we all know which Gongja will choose. That said, the hunter's quest on the 12th floor now begins with Gongja deciding which reward to pick. Getting the Demon King reward seems to be a trap, as the Sword Spirit sees it. Gongja also thinks the same. That's why before making any big decisions, he first analyzes the situation as carefully as possible. Although Gongja somehow thought of choosing the latter since it would definitely be a far easier way to reach the top of the tower. The Spirit Sword kept on reminding him that it's a bad idea since it said that the boss of the 99th floor is more vicious than anyone could imagine. That said, Gongja now has finally made up his mind and chose to ignore all the rewards. This made the Sword Spirit a bit shocked. However, Gongja explains that he will just think of it as losing the battle to win the war. Now that's some words of wisdom right there. After informing the other hunters that he has not chosen any rewards, the reactions are all already quite apparent. That said, the other hunters now choose which reward they'll take, starting with the Sword Saint, who picked the reward of the Goddess. After realizing how the rewards work, the hunters now conclude that it is more of a mafia game, but it wouldn't really be an issue since Paladin's in the group. She can just use her lie detection skill and voila! The traitor has now been caught. However, it turned out it wasn't that easy. Heroic Questionnaire chooses to be the Supreme General of the Empire, Viper as the Captain of the Guards, Paladin as the Director of Foreign Affairs, Black Witch as the Chancellor, and Countess as the Director of Financial Affairs. Now that the reward distribution has ended, there's no way that Gongja will be able to change his decision. As the pronouncement of the rewards takes place, everyone is shocked to hear that 8 people have only chosen the King's reward. Considering Gongja forfeited the reward, it simply means that one person from the group chose the Demon King's reward. Now that the tension has risen, everyone is getting chills down their spine as the excitement starts to take over. That said, Paladin will now start their interrogation. One by one, the Crusader asks each hunter if they are the traitor. But to everyone's surprise, all of them are speaking the truth, and it seems like the traitor is not in the group. Crusader Paladin then explains to the group that the traitor might have used a concealing power, but the Sword Saint seems not to take it that easily and starts to suspect the guild hunters, specifically the Paladin. But now they start pointing fingers at each other once again. Paladin reminds them that in times like this, the most important thing they should do is not lose their cool and trust each other. However, since it took 10 years before the 5 great guilds worked together, the Heroic Questioner seems not to get himself to trust the hunters from the top 8 to 10. That being said, in just a split second, together with Viper, Heroic Questioner starts slaughtering the other 3 hunters in the group. Witnessing this makes our goody two-shoe Grandpa Marcus boil up in anger. Even Gongja is shocked by everything that he is currently witnessing. Innocent warriors are dying in front of him. To make the situation even more sickening, none of the 3 hunters killed chose the Demon King's reward. It's such a shame that they all died in vain. Now that the situation has gotten more complicated, knowing that the traitor is just among 7 of them left, trust is now about to crumble, especially for the 5 guilds that have built the relationship firm for the past 10 years. With things getting out of control, the hunters decided to give all control to Gongja, since among them, he's the only one that's surely not the traitor. That said, to cease the madness that's currently taking place in front of him, Gongja stops the Sword Saint by stating that he will now take the Sword Saint's granddaughter on a date. And surprisingly, it did stop the Sword Saint from attacking the other hunters. All discussions have now flattened. Gongja leads the group by stating that since they can't possibly know which one of them is the traitor, the only thing they can do now is to kill the Demon King. And that way, the demon reward also disappears in the process. And for them to do so, they shall continue climbing the tower and start breaking the Demon King's core. The 12th floor has finally started. Now the hunters must prepare themselves for yet another bloody battle ahead of them. Now using their assigned roles, they must lead their men in order to defeat the Demon King's army since they can't possibly clear the whole floor by just relying on themselves. They must ensure to protect the castle walls no matter what. If the walls are breached, it's the end of the stage. Now that everyone is ready to go on doing their roles, Gongja is also seen going to the army of men waiting to be motivated by Gongja's divine sword. But along with him is the Black Witch, who turns out to have a teleportation skill. That said, to save some time, the Black Witch offers to give Gongja a hand and take him to the gates where the men are waiting. With Gongja's approval and trust, the Black Witch then initiates her magic. In a flash, they are now above the wall where all of the men can see them clearly. There, Black Witch, having the role of Chancellor, decides to spit some inspirational and motivational words to push the men of the Agam Empire to fight for their land. But to add the cherry on top, Gongja shows his sword, and just like that, everyone is now driven to do their best for the Empire. As a glimpse of hope is now given to the people of the Agam Empire, Gongja also slowly realizes that the NPCs on the 12th floor, just like the ones on the 10th, are all manifestations of real people being abandoned by the higher-ups, who decided to abandon the country. That is the reason why the tower set this empire as a stage. That said, with such eagerness, Gongja is now more driven to lead these people than he was earlier. Now with the plan in mind, Gongja tells Black Witch that once they all advance into the battlefield, she must teleport him directly to the Demon King. Confused by Gongja's treacherous request, the Black Witch has nothing to say since Gongja has already planned everything since the beginning. All that she can hope for now is that Gongja is strong enough to fight with the Demon King. Little did she know that Gongja was planning to be murdered by the Demon King so he'll be able to acquire its skill. However, as they thought they were now at the lead, the Demon King then showed his power, and as the tower announces that in the said attack, one warrior was killed. Gongja and Black Witch start scrutinizing who among the 5 left in the throne room was killed, and it seems like it's the Countess. But before they start losing their composure, Black Witch and Gongja decide to fight the battle on their own. Within just 30 seconds, Gongja needs to become the beacon of hope for everybody. That said, Gongja will now start to show his real powers. It's now his time to be a hero, he says. As Gongja follows the flow of his sword, he starts slaughtering one monster after another. With the intense feeling he's currently in right now, Gongja starts leveling up and is now a D-rank hunter. It will just be a matter of time before he reaches the top. And then, to make things even worse, the other hunters then come rushing in to help him. As the plan is slowly taking place, Black Witch, together with the other hunters, are now readying themselves to teleport to the Demon King. However, Gongja, on the other hand, is eyeing to take his plans into action. Knowing that the other hunters will undoubtedly forget what happened once he is reincarnated back 24 hours prior, Gongja seems to have to think twice if he ever wants to continue with the plan. But in the end, he opted to stick with it knowing that he'll become stronger, and he'll do it a lot better the next time around. That said, he lets himself get killed by the Demon King, and as a result, he has now acquired the Demon King of the Autumn Rain's skills, just the way he wanted it to be. After all that he has been through, Gongja seems to still not get the reason why the tower has given him, a worthless loser, such great power. However, that's not what's important right now. All he needs to focus on is how to defeat the Demon King the second time around. And what better way to do that than using the Demon King's skills against them? That said, Gongja then picks up the one that he likes the most. Though it is not revealed, it is just a matter of time before we know it. Then, before he goes 24 hours back, the trauma of the Demon King is also shown to him, but Gongja decides to show it to us some other time around. That's why you should stay updated when we upload a new video to know what happens next. Anyway, let's continue with the story. So, Gongja is finally reincarnated once again. The same events that took place before they all went to the 11th floor come flashing in again. Gongja then asks the other hunters that as an exchange for giving them a hint on what's going to happen in the next level, they need to accept one of Gongja's favors in the future. But they still have the choice not to do so. But as long as they agree to hear him out, the agreement continues. With nothing to lose, the other hunters accept Gongja's requests. On the other hand, since Gongja went back in time, it simply means that he and the Sword Saint hadn't made up yet. Gongja decided to flatten everything before they will enter the 12th floor the next day to save up some time. After asking the Sword Spirit about the Sword Saint's dinner routine, Gongja asks Paladin to join him for a walk. As Gongja and Paladin reach the pharmacist's shop, as expected, the Sword Saint has also followed them after seeing how many kills Gongja has made. There, a small argument between Paladin and the Sword Saint takes place. But that's not what Gongja wants. Before anything gets out of control, the Sword Saint, being weak in front of innocent people like the Paladin and the pharmacist, decides to halt his objective to kill Gongja. But then, Gongja tells him to meet him the next day. That said, as promised, Gongja meets up with the Sword Saint all alone. Gongja then made his move to make the Sword Saint trust him by then again lying that he is a prophet who knows everything. After multiple attempts to convince the Sword Saint, Gongja is finally able to make an agreement with the Sword Saint. In the said agreement, Gongja wants the Sword Saint to leave him alone for 5 days. Shocked by the peculiar request, the Sword Saint agrees. That said, they will now enter the 11th floor once again. Once again, the same things are happening. However, the hunters are more eager this time around. And let's just say that Gongja is fine not being the center of attention, but not in the eyes of the Sword Saint. Gongja, using his navigating skills, helps Black Witch to annihilate the Demon King's army. With the use of both their skills, they were able to clear the floor faster than it was the last time around. With a happy face painted all over Black Witch's face, Gongja is shocked as he realizes that all the girl wants is for fewer casualties to happen each raid. Now that the 12th floor is open for clearing, Gongja then immediately informs the hunters of the said favor of his that he wants them to fulfill. And it's just as simple as for them to stay in the throne room for 5 days. And in that said 5 days, Gongja assures that he will clear all the floors up till the 20th. As Gongja requested from the other hunters, they need to wait for 5 days as Gongja aims to kill the Demon King himself. Although at first, there is no doubt that the other hunters will definitely disagree with such an absurd request, in the end, with a little bit of help from the Heresy Inquisitor, the other hunters end up agreeing with Gongja's request. However, there is one person who we all know wouldn't agree with anything, and it's none other than the Sword Saint. In his defense, Gongja didn't tell him anything about fulfilling a request, and the only thing he agreed upon was to tell Gongja till the quest had been won and the level had been cleared. As a result, the Sword Saint insisted that he should come with Gongja throughout that 5 days. Gongja, on the other hand, agreed immediately since that is really what they had agreed upon. And having someone like the Swordmaster besides him while he fights the Demon King wouldn't be that much of a hassle. It would actually be an advantage. That said, as everything is laid clear with everyone, Gongja will now go on his way to defeat the Demon King. Outside, it seems like the NPCs remain frozen as the quest for the level hadn't started yet. It turns out that if Gongja, together with the other hunters, hasn't chosen a reward yet, the quest will not begin. And now Gongja plans to turn the tables on the Demon King, as he aims to defeat the Demon King on his own game. So instead of losing people and having someone from the group betray everyone, Gongja opted to go with the safest plan he could think of, and that was to kill the Demon King before the quest even started. Of course, this made the Demon King furious. He then tries to scare Gongja into thinking that there's no possible way that he'll be able to defeat him by himself. However, with a wide grin on his face, Gongja bluntly says, "I don't need help," whilst waving his mighty sword up in the air. After all, in a frozen world, by taking up his sword as a clock's hand, the eternal 5 days have now started. As the Demon King and Gongja finally started fighting, Gongja kept on getting killed each and every time. However, instead of feeling sad or discouraged about it, it seems like Gongja is feeling the opposite way this time. Gongja aims to get stronger each and every time he gets killed by the said Demon King. And in each of his comebacks, he tallies the numbers as if he is keeping track of his progress. As this said scenario keeps on repeating endlessly, Gongja's sword now has become the only clock hand to give the world there is now 1 more second. That's why he needs to swing his sword 1 more time. He's simply a sword buying a second to save as many people as he can. In each of his comebacks, the casualties in level 11 kept on decreasing from 40 to 20 to 10 until it reached the point that it didn't have any casualties anymore. And seeing the Black Witch's happy face also makes Gongja happy. I smell something fishy. Anyways, that said, as they now reach level 12 once more while fighting the Demon King, a slight smile was painted on Gongja's face as his plan is slowly falling into place. However, this time, instead of fighting alone, the other hunters have now joined Gongja in his fight to defeat the Demon King. Feeling threatened, the Demon King unleashed his goblins. Little did he know that Gongja hadn't run out of cards yet. To the Demon King's astonishment, Gongja raised his pointy finger as he shouts, "100 ghost summoning!" We then go into a backstory. There's a thing that grew larger and larger every time it obtained a new body, and that thing gained a new joy, even the joy of slaughter. The thing swallowed up its prey. Once it's finished eating every last bit, it slowly obtains the memories of its prey. The said thing had eaten a little hopeless girl whose name was Esther. However, as the little girl's father started looking for her, instead of seeing a pool of blood surrounding his daughter's body, he's welcomed by his daughter smiling widely at him. Esther, that was the first ever name that the Demon King obtained. Going back to the hunters, Gongja then tells the reason to Sword Emperor why he chooses the 100 Ghost Summoning skill, or now known as the Ghoul Summoning. Well, it's simply because he can summon the ones he has murdered as monsters. And since technically his kill count is over 4,000, it means that the tower tabulates death in a different manner, which is a great thing, since the number of times he had killed himself will definitely be of an advantage, knowing that it's a battle between numbers of soldiers. Gongja's team will definitely win, as with one spell, he can bring his 4,000 times death self back to life as monsters. This definitely shocked everyone. That said, Gongja then asked the World Saint to fight alongside the skeletons since, with his help, they should be able to hold their ground against the enemy. Sword Saint then immediately follows his orders. As for the Black Dragon Witch, she will be helping Gongja to beat the Demon King together. That said, the battle has now commenced. The skeleton starts fighting the goblins with all their might. Although some of them start breaking apart, their overflowing numbers is just outmatched. They're technically a monster army that doesn't fear death, and that's freaking terrifying. This made the Demon King furious as hell. "How dare you?" the Demon King said. The Demon King then added that despite being nothing more than a traveler from another world, and despite not carrying any malice or resentment, nor possessing life in this world, how dare Gongja get in his way? Gongja then asks why it always matters where he's from. He's already standing there, present, so the Demon King should just shut his mouth up and shove it. That said, the tower then presents Gongja with an alliance. He's now called the King of Death. The tower has already acknowledged his right to be there. That's why he then rushes towards the Demon King, aiming to finally defeat it once and for all. Then a backstory is shown once again. That thing from earlier did not age. In fact, it only grew more beautiful by the day. A scent enveloped its body and enchants the people around it. Esther has now become the saintess of the Outlands. People start coming to her all across the globe in hopes that by using her healing power, their loved ones will be cured. Little did the people know that Esther was actually a demon inside. One day, a mother so desperate to save her child from an incurable disease gave her baby to the saintess. As the mother left, Esther then immediately engulfed the whole baby, seeing all of its memories. However, as weird as it may seem, Esther is able to hand back all the babies she engulfs back to their parents. That said, she became an enactor of miracles and the savior of the sick. However, the kingdom wasn't happy to see so many people joining the Saintess of Salvation. As a result, they have decided to raid Esther's territory and kill everyone who follows her together with her. Seeing this made Esther angry and disgusted at how the soldiers treated their fellow humans no better than beasts. At this point, she just burst out as she decided to swallow each and every one of them in their own malice. Going back to the current battle between Gongja and the Demon King, it seems like Gongja is having a difficult time defeating his enemy. Since the Ghoul Summoning needs to reboot, he technically needs to wait at least 1 week before he can use the skill again. That said, as the fight continues to intensify, Gongja has no other choice but to use his own tactics to win the fight. As his plans are about to finally work, Gongja sees a hint of skin from the Demon King, as if its body is just covered in black slime. Before the Demon King can even get defeated, it rushes to escape Gongja's hand. Now Gongja then questions, what's all that effort for, if the Demon King can just escape anytime he wants? But before he could become any more discouraged, the tower offered Gongja a hidden quest, and there's no doubt that Gongja will immediately accept it. The quest is called the Hero of a Time-Frozen World, and it's just a matter of time before we know what's going to happen next. As Gongja and the Black Dragon Witch start looking for the Demon King, it seems like they can't possibly find them anywhere. Then, the timeline in Agim Kingdom had changed due to the timeline alteration. That said, they did go back in time before the Demon King invaded the whole kingdom. At this time, the kingdom could have either won or lost, but the invasion was an event set in time. But as a plot twist in this world, the invasion by the Demon King became an event that never happened. The whole levels 11 and 12 are altered, as what is stated in the hidden quest description. In short, history had been rewritten by Gongja. Seeing Sarbast Agim yelling at him, Gongja laughs so loud as he remembers how the Empire was eagerly wanting his help, but now they just shout at him not knowing what happened. That said, inside Gongja's mind, he must have already defeated the Demon King after spending hundreds of days getting killed and coming back to life for the sake that no one from the Empire dies. He's so proud of himself. I mean, who wouldn't? He had lived like a piece of trash once in his life before. He froze his heart while using rationality as an excuse. But now, he already threw that life away and is currently being welcomed by a much more prosperous one. Stage cleared, the tower announces, marking it so that Gongja's sacrifices have not gone in vain. That said, Gongja, together with the Sword Saint and Black Dragon Witch, will now enter the 13th floor to yet again face another adventure. As Gongja and the others have finally reached the 13th level, they are once again welcomed by the Demon King. However, this time around, the Sword Emperor notices something strange. The Demon King, from being an SSS rank monster, had become a non-SSS rank monster. It's weird since for each level surpassed, monsters and hunters usually became stronger. However, it seems like in the Demon King's case, it's the opposite effect. It turns out that the erasure of the Demon King's invasion in history caused this. As a result, the Demon King's wrath starts to explode as it screams in anger. It then lets loose its zombie men to take care of the 3 hunters. Although it seems like Gongja and the others wouldn't have any problem defeating the zombies, well, they did. That's why, using his revival powers every time that he dies, Gongja tries to remember certain events from the fight that may be of advantage to them, such as the secret tunnel where the magic hammer that kills zombies is kept, as well as the fact that the giant zombie's eye can't be attacked, or else the laser beam will torch them to their death. That said, after many trials and errors and deaths after death, Gongja, together with the Sword Saint and the Black Dragon Witch, is able to slowly defeat the Demon King again, as the Demon King retreats from floors 13 to 14 until it reaches floor 19. The Demon King then blames Gongja for what is happening to him. If Gongja had just followed the proper steps, none of such things would have happened to him. However, Gongja doesn't think of that anymore. He then asks the Demon King while looking at his eyes to fight with him. Gongja added that the Demon King could just run away if he wanted to. However, if he did, it would just be a disadvantage to him, knowing that each time he runs away, he gets weaker and weaker. That said, if the Demon King doesn't fight him right there, he won't be able to get the chance to beat Gongja again. The Demon King, on the other hand, doesn't have plans to fight with Gongja. However, when Gongja states the name Esther, the Demon King's eyes widen. Now it's only a matter of time before we'll see what happens next. With all issues being laid flat in the previous episode, it's now time to finally talk about a certain nightmare. Hungry Nightmare. Hungry, the trauma of the monster Demon King. As the village where Esther, aka the Demon King, once lived, together with some of her people, "Burn the witch's nest," said the soldiers, as clearly heard by Gongja. Esther, on the other hand, questions herself, why? Why do people burn their own kind? To make everything worse, it seems like the whole raid was not just made by a single kingdom, but by a treaty of different groups and nations. As the screams of agony envelop the whole little village, Esther gets angry each and every second as she sees her people getting burned alive. One day has gone by, and the happy memories of her people come rushing back to her as she sees the dead, torched corpses of the innocents lying on the ground. So devastated at what happened, she starts eating the ashes while muttering the words, "Poor things." As she can't anymore hold back the tears, the wrath inside her has overflowed. Caught in the idea that her people were called monsters even though they were mere innocent humans, her anger has now resulted in revenge. That said, the resentment she feels poured like rain, and the cries of the heart echoed. Anyone who was there that day was cursed by the intense wrath Esther felt. The pouring rain will stop any more villages from burning. Seeing all this made Gongja feel as if something heavy was put over his chest. After the trauma reenactment had been completed, the target's ego had remained intact. As Gongja swings his swords, the screams of Esther echo the battlefield. The slime has become significantly smaller. There is very little slime left. However, Esther wouldn't allow being defeated as the resentment and the cries of her people still lingered in her. She now aims to run away to floor 20, and Gongja is in favor of that. Gongja wants to make the Demon King go back to her base, the final demon castle. Since she doesn't have any choices anymore, she ends up really running away to the 20th floor. That said, time alteration happens once more as the 19th floor has been cleared. Gongja then asks the Black Dragon Witch and Sword Saint to grant him a favor. He wants to face the Demon King all by himself. And surprisingly, the Sword Saint agrees to it as well as the Black Dragon Witch. As Gongja enters the 20th floor, the tower starts tabulating the rewards he has acquired from clearing floors 11 to 19. He's now granted the authority of an apostle with restrictions. He now has the authority to modify any skills he possesses, with the exception of an X-rank skill. Now that's a good catch for a skill. Though Gongja doesn't know why the tower was built or who built it, or why it's filled with living beings from another world, but now he has at least an inkling to what kind of being the tower is. It is a being that watches over our choices, and a being that remembers his choices. That said, with nowhere else to escape, Gongja assures that this is the final act for the Demon King. As the bonus stage initializes, the Demon King then tells Gongja not to destroy her village as a clear blue sky is seen. Rain will definitely not fall anytime soon. The final stage of finally defeating the Demon King has finally commenced. The 20th floor is the world's smallest stage and the world's weakest boss monster. As the Demon King rushes toward Gongja in hopes of defeating him, as a turn of events, their position has now been changed. From Gongja depending on the Empire and being the weak one in level 11, to the Demon King doing the same thing now. By continuously swinging his sword, Gongja finally removes the slimy veil of Esther as it reveals the real flesh and skin of the said demon. Esther then rushes off, trying to escape from Gongja. She then states that Gongja has no right to do such things to her, knowing what the people have done to her people. However, Gongja turned everything on her. Though Gongja does get where Esther is coming from, considering all the inhabitants of the unknown world had combined their forces to burn down her village, but hypothetically, Esther has no right to blame Gongja or any other hunter for what happened, as they're not really part of that event. Gongja then states to her that if there's one person to blame, she is the one, considering she concealed the truth that she ate the little girl and became Esther. She maintained her silence because she feared that people might treat her as a monster. Esther has no right to say that she didn't know. After all, she is no different from the people who killed her people, since she also took a lot of innocent lives herself. Esther then reasoned out that she has no memory of some sort. That's why she doesn't know what is right from what is wrong. That said, Gongja then decided to use his newly acquired skill. He wishes to modify his ghoul summoning skill, the part that says will not inherit memories. Gongja wants the ones he summons to inherit their memories if he wants them to. Then, as Gongja is about to kill Esther in the hopes that once he kills her, every memory of the person she devoured will also come back as well. However, it seems Esther is far more persistent than we have imagined. But her swordsmanship skills are no better than those of an amateur. As a result, Gongja is still able to restrain her. As he is about to kill her, the Sword Emperor then halted him for a minute. They then discussed whether the skill will work on an NPC like Esther. This made Gongja also wonder. That's why instead of giving themselves some headaches, Gongja opted to ask the tower instead. However, the tower itself doesn't even know the answer. As the tower verified the authority of the questionnaire, the tower now acknowledges the King of Death, aka Gongja's question, as an official subject for discussion. The tower now requests a vote from the 6 pillars of all lives. That said, Gongja is then engulfed in brightness and is transported to somewhere else. Gongja is then transported to a village where the 6 pillars of life in the said world are residing at. There, the said pillars have a meeting to decide whether Gongja's request for the NPC is to be included in his ghoul summoning skills. 2 of the pillars have a positive response to Gongja, while 2 give a negative response, and 1 is undecided. That means that at this point, the voting is currently at a tie. Now it's up to the master of the tower, pillar number 1, to choose whether Gongja's request is to be fulfilled. With a little bit of convincing, the master of the tower ended up giving a positive response. That being said, Gongja will now be able to fulfill his desire to execute his prey, Esther. When he finally returned to his senses, the whole event that took place between him and the pillars just happened in the blink of an eye. That said, as soon as he sees Esther bowing for her life, he's now about to stab her with a sword. That's when the Sword Emperor tries to stop him. When Gongja tells the Sword Emperor about the existence of the pillars, it seems like the legend doesn't know of such existences. That leaves Gongja with the conclusion that there are certain things in the tower that he might be the only one who knows. That said, as he has now decided to end Esther's life, he lifts his mighty sword up in the air and strikes her with it. As soon as Esther dies, Gongja immediately summons her back to life. When Esther comes back to life, Gongja gives the demon a name of its own, and it is Preda. Now Preda is one of the subjects under Gongja, and from now on, Gongja will be her master. The whole level has also been altered due to the timeline alteration. That said, as the soldiers from the Empire arrive, the same happenings from before take place once again. Will it be a happy ending this time around? Or will the fate of the village stay the same? The people of the burned village have come back and life in the said town has been going normal so far. As a result, the same happenings from history are happening once again. However, this time around, Gongja has a plan to help Esther, now Preda, and the village. As he waves his mighty sword up in the air and the soldiers of the Empire arrive, the men, especially General Sarbast Agim, are astonished to see that Gongja has the prophesized sword everyone knows of. As a result, General Sarbast together with the others have shown their respect for the one owning the sword as they bow their heads down. As they see Gongja as the emissary of the founder, everyone involved in the alliance halts their operation as Gongja states that there's no need to continue with their mission since he has already subjugated the so-called witch, which is Preda. He made her do so many things to prove to everyone that he already has control over her. He made her bow down her head to the ground, tuck and roll, headstand, and even made her plank. As Preda's body can't take it anymore, she crashes towards the ground. Seeing this made everyone shocked, except for one. An animal-looking man who proposed that Gongja should undergo a test using the soul orb. With just one drop of blood, the orb can find out if the person has a good soul or an evil one. This way, they'll truly know if Gongja is stating the truth about his identity as an emissary, and if he really did subjugate the witch. So when Gongja and Preda undergoes the said test, Preda's blood inflicted a pitch black color on the crystal, indicating she is indeed the Demon King, while as it surprised many, Gongja's blood made the crystal as bright as it can possibly be. However, this didn't stop the soldiers from charging as one of their missions is to burn the whole place down, not just the witch. Before any of the soldiers can get their hands on the villagers, Gongja uses his ghoul summoning skills to summon the dead. Using his skill, he used it to convince the soldiers that even if it's a monster or a human, as long as he is able to subjugate it, he can have full control so no one would have to worry about such a thing. This way he can make sure that no casualties are about to be made. He even used the Flame Emperor as an example to the audience, and as the people slowly ended up getting convinced by his words, the tower now has finally announced that Gongja has already cleared the normal stage, the hidden quest, and the boss stage. That said, Gongja immediately became an instant star to many, that even the Black Dragon Witch started to screenshot some articles about him. Now that 5 days have gone by already, it's time for them to meet with the others. And since Gongja is far more than just a guild member, the Black Dragon Witch suggested they start calling him as a guild master, considering how fast he has ranked up the ranking even if he is an outsider. That said, as they are now about to talk about the splitting of the rewards, Gongja wants all of the 20th floor all to himself. He doesn't care what the other hunters will do with the reward from level 11 to 19, as long as level 20 is his. The Black Dragon Witch then asks why he decided to do so, knowing that level 20 is not that much of a land in the first place. Gongja then just reasoned out that he is into real estate more than anything. That said, Gongja together with Black Dragon Witch and the Sword Saint are now about to go back to the first floor where a meeting with the other hunters will take place. However, as Gongja arrives, a sea of camera flashes welcomes him. At this moment, Gongja has fully realized his impact to everyone. As Gongja and the others decided to return back to the first floor, the only thing that welcomed them was a sea of cameras clicking. Being a star will never be easy. That's why with this much attention, Gongja needs to be mindful at all times. As a result, the Black Dragon Witch then tells him to have some sort of image to the media. Many hunters try to have a poker face when dealing with the media, meaning in most cases, they look emotionless to avoid any headlines scattering all around the tower. However, being emotionless is something not that easy to do. The Black Dragon Witch, on the other hand, has some sort of way to be able to do so. She just thinks of one bad memory from her past. In her case, she reminisces the time when her father died during the Civil War, and how she didn't look back at all. This memory serves as her strength as well as trauma. Meanwhile, in Gongja's case, he just thinks of the time when the Flame Emperor killed him. That said, as they reach the coffee shop, the other hunters welcome Gongja happily. They're quite shocked at the fact that Gongja really did clear floors 12 to 20 in just 5 days. On the other hand, the hunters have also experienced some unforgettable moments during their time in the chamber. Turns out that after Gongja had cleared level 12 and the NPC started moving, the warriors from the Empire started capturing them thinking they were intruders. For some reason, the other hunters didn't really get bothered by the idea that they were captured. In fact, they even enjoyed the whole thing since it reminded them of their childhood. As they reminisce on their childhood, the hunters have decided to talk about how the outside world had been really different from the inside, and since the King of Death was an instrumental factor in the advancement of the guilds inside the tower. As a result, the Black Dragon Witch aims to make Gongja the hero that represents the tower. That's why they instantly give him a makeover as well as make him go to a photo shoot. When Gongja finally had enough, together with Sword Saint, they flee the said studio. In what seems to be a church, Sword Saint and Gongja had the chance to talk in private. During that time, Gongja is shocked to find that the Sword Saint has finally acknowledged him. With everything going smoothly for him, the Goddess of Protection turns out to be the same mighty sword he got from level 11. That's why time is the only one that can say where Gongja will be in the next levels. Due to its intense popularity, Gongja is now seen all over the news. In one video posted on the internet, Gongja is seen clearing 11 with a single strike. This event really amazes people. The Goddess of Protection says it's because its accomplishment is that unprecedented. Now that they have the chance to talk, Gongja states that the Goddess of Protection might have been overestimating him. However, the Goddess of Protection states so that this is the light and that she clearly remembers the Lion's Roar Gongja shouted on top of the Empire's wall. This really embarrasses Gongja to the next level. The Goddess of Protection then states that she was originally a holy spirit that's worshipped as a god. However, the founder of the Empire, Lefante Agim, sealed her by splitting her up into 5 swords. And the sword says that she is the first of those holy swords, called the Idol. The first sword is called the Idol, the second called the PT, third the Prayer, fourth the Sacrifice, and fifth the Salvation. Goddess of Protection then starts to brag that by gathering up all the 5 sister swords, she can regain the power of her golden days. So Gongja then asks her where she would look for the said swords, to which the Goddess of Protection doesn't respond. That said, without giving her any other choices, Gongja says that if she doesn't keep talking, he will immediately execute her. That said, the conference talking about how Gongja and the other hunters were able to help clear the levels has already started. The Black Dragon Witch is the one who is happiest to the fact that not one single person died during the whole raid. Seeing how far they've come as individuals in the tower, everyone seems to relate to what the Black Dragon Witch has been feeling all along. Then, a reporter asks the King of Death directly. This really shocks Gongja in many levels. The reporter wants to clear some rumors about Gongja being a grand rookie prepared by the major guilds in secret. Since if this is true, it means the King of Death is a hero manufactured by the major guilds. The reporters also asked other questions regarding the floor's political rights for hunters. The Black Witch states that Gongja shouldn't answer the question and let it be. However, Gongja immediately stated no, without any breaks, since in the first place such speculations that make him look bad are not true. He then added to say to the reporter that he has his own ways. The Black Witch then states Gongja that he shouldn't go too crazy, but if he were able to go too far, she won't be able to control the media. However, he assures her that nothing's going to happen. Gongja introduces himself, and what he said after will shock everyone. Instead of pressuring people to acknowledge him since he cleared level 20, he openly said that the reason people are concerned is because of his inadequacy. Remembering how the Flame Emperor handled such situations, he decided to just mutter positive words. Such tactics did really work. As a result, he immediately got into the people's hearts. As floor 21 is about to open, the Black Witch concludes the conference. However, before they can even leave, a reporter then asks what is the real deal between Gongja and her, and the answer couldn't get any more showbizy. "We are comrades that are more than friends," she said. And this statement literally made Gongja blush. Her statement left everyone curious of the two, and in Black Witch's defense, one should have a fiery ending in order to leave a lasting impression, and that's her fiery ending. Gongja then tries to clear up what she meant by her statement earlier, and the Black Witch then states that it's just a green smoke. What a bummer. Since she thought that inverting the media's attention to her instead of Gongja would be a great option this time, considering she had handled them quite well before. 10 seconds before the next floor opens, everyone is very excited. As the event starts, some are shocked that the tower forcibly teleports them to the next level, even if they don't mutter the word teleport. It turns out that from today on, only those warriors that have been selected will carry on the great feat, which means only few hunters can climb the tower from now on. As they reach level 21, a kid welcomes them, stating that he has waited for them every day for eternity. "Welcome to the great library of all knowledge," the kid says. Life is a process that starts and ends with encounters. The kid states that the true meaning of life is meeting people after people. He's the constellation Hold Up head librarian. The Black Witch then asks the kid who he is, but the kid only states that he is a nameless pawn that manages a slightly large library, and that compared to her, he is basically a worthless extra. What the kid meant by a slightly large library is technically a world made up of libraries. The kid then welcomes the other hunters, calling them the epic heroes. It is then revealed that the books gathered in the library are no ordinary books. They are books related to the history of the world, about the worlds where the tower exists. The kid then explains why only a few hunters are summoned to the said level, and the reason is quite simple. It's because in their world, these hunters are the only ones with names as characters. All 302 people gathered here are warriors with aliases. Everyone is quite shocked to know that they are just few, thinking that there's no possible way they can surpass and clear the floor with just this number of people. However, the kid assures them that they can definitely find their way out. So just to give a taste of his powers, the kid opens a book. Just like he stated earlier, the books in the library are no ordinary books. The Great Library of All Knowledge is a library that records countless worlds. That said, the kid holds two books. One that envelops the world the hunters have cleared, while on the other hand, the hunter's own world. There are many names people can call these books. Some call them epics, while some prefer chronicles. And there are even some that call them annals or sagas. But the librarian, aka the kid, has a personal term that he prefers. He calls them the apocalypse. This term doesn't only mean the end of the world, but it also means disclosure or revolution of great knowledge. That said, as the librarian opens one book, he states that the hunter's apocalypse is, according to their preferred terminology, in serialization. However, not all serializations of the apocalypse progress so smoothly. There are apocalypses that end up facing cancellation. The reason of cancellation can be a fire or water, which is tragic. The characters of this particular apocalypse were alive just like the hunters in the 21st floor. But before they could even reach the proper conclusion or arouse a grandeur ending, everything ended due to an unjust reason. And this is something that the librarian calls cancellation. Seeing all these gruesome images made the other hunters vomit. That said, the librarian now states that the quest he will give them is simple. The hunters just need to pick 8 volumes among the cancelled apocalypses. And he just wants them to finish reading through the cancelled apocalypse, since he wants to see more stories from the fallen worlds. In simple terms, the quest wants the hunters to enter 8 worlds and save them from their endings. That said, the librarian as expected has some magical powers, and almost everything inside the library is magical, from his books to his magical moving bookmark maids. Everything is going smoothly until some of the hunters felt like they don't need to burden themselves on entering a book of apocalypse just to clear the quest. In their heads, the quest will pretty much end if the librarian is to be killed. They want to be as powerful as Gongja or even much better than him. Hearing this made the Black Witch furious. But before she can make a move of any sort, Gongja informs her that the quest is being broadcast live just like main characters, as he can clearly remember from his past life. That said, they must be mindful of their actions, since getting a negative impression from the audience would be a problem. However, the other hunters, 50 of them specifically, didn't want to follow the rules. As a result, even with the Sword Saint's warning that the librarian is much more powerful than they think, they ended up going with their plan. This caused them to be engulfed by a black entity into a magical book where humans didn't survive. Witnessing this made the remaining hunters mindful of their actions. Now that the extras have been annihilated, the remaining survivors will finally feel like becoming main characters. 50 people getting eliminated from the get-go is quite awful. As a result, even if they are in fear, the remaining hunters try to keep their composure. After all, in order to make progress, sacrifices are unavoidable. Now as the other hunters feel fear through their body, someone needs to stand up for the group. That said, Gongja tries to give them a word of encouragement. He tells them that they can't just rashly pick a fight with the constellation. The best course of action for them right now is to simply follow the quest the head librarian gave them. The only thing that the hunters need to do is look at the quest window carefully. It says that as long as the hunters will be able to save the cancelled world they choose, that world will be registered as floor 22, meaning that it will be theirs already. Depending on what world they save, their reward will change. If they save a world that has many resources from diamonds, food, water, and others, technically it will solve all of their needs. As Gongja opens one book, it is revealed that without the librarian activation, those apocalypses are no different from ordinary books, and all the forbidden books are kept hidden deep. That said, Gongja then tells the hunters to gather around and read some books, as they need to pick out books that are actually possible to clear, as well as beneficial for them. That's all we have for today.